So let's use that word stipulation. So stipulation is one of the key terms in there, and it's a term that you probably don't use in your day-to-day language. Some of these key terms, when you're going through and reviewing these key terms for your exam, you'll find that some of them make sense. Some of them, it's a pretty clear understanding, and maybe if you have some sort of legal background, you might understand what a stipulation is, but otherwise, it's definitely one of the terms that could show up on your exam. But again, it's not going to be something as simple as what's the definition of a stipulation. We'll write that one up here. So this first one I want to talk about is by no means the most important key word that's in here, but it's a great example of one that might seem a little bit foreign, but once you have a basic understanding of what a stipulation is, it makes a lot more sense. So how they might use this word stipulation in the exam, again, an application-based question, not just a definition memorization-based question, is maybe something like Sue has had a complaint filed against her that's been investigated by the DBPR, and the probable cause panel has found probable cause against Sue. Now, Sue has been issued her election of rights, and Sue is reviewing her options. I'm making this up off the top of my head here. So Sue is reviewing her options. Which option might she choose where she makes a deal with a DRE, a Division of Real Estate, attorney as to what her penalty may be? So notice how we've got this big elaborate scenario that I just laid out there. And I'll run through it one more time just in case you missed any of that stuff. So we've got Sue. We'll paraphrase a little bit this time. Sue, she gets a complaint against her. It's been investigated. There's probable cause. She gets the election of rights. She's reviewing her options in the election of rights, and she's considering making a deal, coming to an agreement with a Division of Real Estate attorney. What would this be called? What would Sue be seeking? And the answer would be a stipulation. So now notice how this is a very detailed scenario. This is a very detailed scenario, and you don't need to know this, you don't need to memorize this detailed scenario. Really, the key thing it is that we want to pay attention to in this question that tells us the answer is stipulation is that she's got a complaint and she's trying to make a deal. It's one of the options we have in the election of rights. So this is about the complaint process. It's not one of the largest chapters in your course, but you will have questions like this on your exam. This is a great example of how the questions might be phrased for something as simple as stipulation. So really, if we wanted to just make a one-word definition of this, and this really helps out a lot, if you could come up with any sort of one-word definitions, and these are not perfect definitions, but if I were to just pick one word for a definition for stipulation just to make this easy, to make this simple, it would be a deal. Now, I would always start out by just trying to get down a basic one word, almost like a synonym. Now, this isn't the best definition. Again, it's a very simple definition. It's very easy to remember because reading through that scenario that we just talked about, we could clearly see, okay, Sue wants to make a deal. Well, a deal, when it deals with complaints, is stipulation. So always start out with just a basic one-word type of definition. If you can, maybe 2 words, but you want something super simple. The more complex you make this, the more complicated this is going to be to remember. The more difficult it's going to be to remember if you further complicate this. So you don't want to further complicate it. You want to try to make it as simple as possible. So this is a deal with a Division of Real Estate attorney, which DRE, the Division of Real Estate, is just a division within the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. So we could also think of this as the DBPR. So deal with Division of Real Estate attorney. Now, if you've got that much down, now ideally you start with just this one word because there's a lot of terms to know in this course. So if you're trying to memorize every last term, if you're trying to remember the complex, detailed definition, like if you look in the glossary of your textbook or read back where it talks about a stipulation, you'll see a big paragraph. And that's good, but this is where you use your highlighter or you underline kind of the key words, and maybe you kind of put like a little box around what that most important key word about a stipulation actually is. Because when you do that, now if you can just remember deal, you're really close. Because you're probably not going to see stipulation in a context where it could also be confused with any other type of deal, maybe a contract deal, something like that, where we're talking about dealing with buying a house. But this is a deal with the Division of Real Estate Attorneys. So you kind of get my point that I'm trying to make here. A very simple term of stipulation. If you just remember it's a deal, and if you're studying, a great way to study for this stuff is using flashcards. So flashcards are really helpful when we're dealing with key terms. Put stipulation on one side, then on the back side, just like I've got this laid out here. You've got a big bullet point, big word there, write it nice and big so you know that, hey, this is the key point that you want to remember, that this is a deal, our kind of synonym. And then a little bit further detail. Deal with Division of Real Estate Attorney, and Division of Real Estate, part of the DBPR. This is the extent of what I'd recommend that you remember for stipulation. Now, it's not the exact scenario that you're going to see on the exam, because again, the exam is going to be application based. It's going to take this simple concept and now try to work it into the scenario, like I gave you earlier with Sue and dealing with the FREC and her complaint and what she is seeking when she's looking to make an agreement to what the penalty may be. And you might not even see this key word of deal on the exam. It might say something of Sue is trying to get an agreement to what the penalty may be. Well, we might again paraphrase that a little bit, rephrase the question to the words it is that we know. Sue's trying to make a deal. So that's one key term here. And again, these key terms that I'm mentioning, if you've got any in particular it is that you've got questions about, drop them in the comments and we'll absolutely kind of clear that up and try to make it nice and simple for you for what it is you need to know for the exam. But this is a great example of a term we do not use in our day-to-day language. Before your real estate course, you might have never said the word stipulate or stipulation in the past. So that's where this becomes a little bit difficult. Imagine you're in some sort of foreign country that doesn't speak English and you don't speak the language that they speak there. It's very difficult to communicate anything. That's how it is on your exam. If you don't know how to speak the language, now the questions again are not going to ask just what is the definition of this word, but they'll use these key terms in the questions as well as the answers. And again, if you can't speak the language, that's where there's that barrier there between understanding. Let's see here. We got some stuff coming in over on Facebook here, which we'll touch on these in a second. If you've got a key term, drop that into the comments and we'll touch specifically on that key term. Now, another one I want to talk about, another one that is commonly misinterpreted, because those are really the ones that I want to kind of try to pull out as many as possible today, is the ones where common sense might tell you something otherwise, or would be a little bit more difficult to use context clues, because that is something that works a lot. If you use context clues, a lot of times you could figure out what these unfamiliar words may mean. But there's certain key terms that can sound deceiving if we use context clues. So another one I want to talk about is acknowledgement. Use a different color here so you guys can see that. So the word acknowledgement. Now, what is acknowledgement or acknowledgement, depending how it is that you want to pronounce this, and if you could kind of read my terrible handwriting that's up here. So this word acknowledgement, if we're using context clues, we might look at that word acknowledgement and say something along the lines of, hey, we're going to acknowledge that something exists. That's how we use this word of acknowledge in day-to-day life. You probably have used that word acknowledge at some point. It's probably not part of your normal vocabulary, but you've probably said it or come across it at some time before. Now, when we get specific with the real estate course and what acknowledgement is particularly referring to, and this isn't, again, with our simple definitions here, if we try to take them at face value for every way that can be interpreted, there will be some flaws. But for what you want to remember with the exam when we're dealing with acknowledgement, so the key thing we want to focus on, and again, if you're making flashcards with these things here, using different colors can be super helpful. So maybe putting what's most important that you want to remember about it in a nice bright color like red, or using a highlighter or something like that. So acknowledgement refers to the process of notarization. So this is where this can be deceiving, because again, they're not going to ask you what the definition of acknowledgement is on the exam, but the question might be something that seems simple, but definitely requires a lot of memory, such as which of the following is required for a valid real estate contract to purchase a single-family home? So maybe that's your question that you're coming across on the exam. Which of the following is a required element for a valid purchase and sale contract of a single-family home? One of those options might be acknowledgement. And if we don't know exactly what acknowledgement means, if we're trying to use, and with this we don't really have much context clues, because the answer choices would maybe be something like acknowledgement being our wrong answer, maybe in writing and signed. For purchase and sale of a single-family home, it's got to be in writing and signed, so that would be a valid answer. Maybe competent parties, that's another thing that would have to go on there. Maybe it does use the word of notarization in there, as well as acknowledgement, and these two are basically one and the same for the purposes of the exam. And who knows whatever other valid options they might have on there. But again, knowing this word of acknowledgement, that it means the process of notarization, something very important, a key point that you want to remember for your exam. Number one, knowing what this word means. Knowing that acknowledgement means notarization. This one, I would say, if I were to pick one of the most deceiving words in the curriculum for the syllabus for what we think it means versus what it actually means in terms of the course, it would be acknowledgement. Because we might think acknowledge, we acknowledge that something exists. We acknowledge a contract. But when we're referring to, in exam purposes, the word acknowledgement, it means that the contract would be notarized. And if the question is asking what is required for a valid purchase and sale contract of a single-family home, we do not need acknowledgement. We do not need the contract to be notarized. It's perfectly legal for it to be notarized. If we want to get it notarized, we could, but there's no legal requirement. The state of Florida does not require any of our documents to be notarized. So the two ones where this often gets confused with this word acknowledgement and notarization. And again, if we want to add a little bit to this for what it is that we want to remember, we might put in that second bullet point of not required. And there are some times where acknowledgement is required, but for the context of what's covered in the course, it's not required. For contracts, for deeds, we do not need to have notarization of the contract or the deed for its essential purpose. So with a contract for purchase and sale, the purpose of the contract is to have an agreement between the buyer and the seller that they're going to buy and sell their property for this aforementioned price and all the other details that are in the contract. That doesn't have to be notarized. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. The other one that's commonly confused, and this gets back to where we're talking more about the key points with the deed. The deed, that document that delivers the ownership, that transfers the ownership from one party to another, you might think that that needs to be acknowledged. You might think that that is something that needs to be notarized. For transferring, it does not. For a deed to transfer ownership from one person to another, it does not need to be notarized. And that's something that's commonly wrong, that a lot of people think that it would have to be notarized. It makes sense to have it notarized, and if you had purchased a home, and this is where the real world can confuse you when we're dealing with the theoretical stuff, it probably is notarized. A lease, a lot of times, especially commercial leases, might be notarized, or at least witnessed, but it's not required. Now, where you do see that notarization is sometimes required, sometimes, and not even all the time with this, but typically you'll need to have a deed notarized if you want to put it into the public records. If you want to file it in the public records, which we could kind of link these words together, acknowledgement is the process of notarization, and if we want to make something, and this is where it's something less important, but there's another term called constructive notice. Constructive notice, let's put that up here. So that's another term that we've got. I'll try to write a little bit neater here. So constructive notice, this is when we take something and we record it in the public records. When we take our deed and we want to put it in the public records. Now remember, it's not required. Constructive notice, so the key thing we want to remember, what we're going to put in red here, is recording. And that's the one word. Notice how with all these here, I'm giving you guys the one word that you want to remember. Yes, there's a much more elaborate and complex definition. If you know that inside and out, you could really understand this fully. You got to get there. You're not at that point yet. You got to start with baby steps. And the baby steps, the first thing is just kind of coming up with something that's almost like a synonym. Stipulation, deal. Acknowledgement, notarization. Constructive notice, recording. That's a lot easier to remember than the great big paragraph for each one of these. You got to start with these basic fundamentals. Once you have those down, then you could build upon it and start to use it in situations and make a little bit more sense out of it. But you got to start with these basic fundamentals and get that down before you worry about any extra information with these. Get that first one word down so you know the basic sense of what this word means. Constructive notice means that we're recording something in the public records. Now, nothing that we cover is required in Florida to be recorded in the public records. Contracts don't really ever get recorded in the public records typically. Deeds almost always are recorded in the public records, so there's almost always constructive notice of deeds. But now the question on the exam and what that difference can be, because the exam doesn't care so much about what is required or what's typically done. It cares more so about what is required, not what is typically done, because typically constructive notice is done for a deed. It is recorded in the public records. But for a deed to transfer property, what is required to transfer property, we don't require constructive notice. Now, if we do want to put something in public records, just to kind of tie in some real world stuff here, typically when you do go to put something in the public records, the local county is going to require it to be notarized. That's where acknowledgement comes in. But for exam purposes, what you want to remember for exam purposes, nothing requires acknowledgement. So you got to keep this stuff simple. The more complicated you make it, the more difficult it's going to be to remember when you're trying to regurgitate this information for the exam. We're going to take a quick commercial break. For those of you guys that have sent in some questions, I see a bunch of stuff coming in over on Facebook as well as some on YouTube here. Stay tuned because I'm going to go ahead and address these questions as soon as we get back from this commercial break. We'll be back in less than 2 minutes. I'm John Christmer. You're watching Ask the Instructor. If you've been thinking about real estate, look, in this current market, it's hard not to. There's so many opportunities that exist out there for residential real estate, commercial real estate, business brokerage, property management. I mean, it's ridiculous how much opportunity lies from having a real estate license. So look, if you've been thinking about getting a real estate license, I mean, it's minimal cost compared to starting other careers and starting other businesses to get into this. So I urge you to check it out and give it a try. I mean, even if you're just using your license for personal use, you've got huge, immense benefits there. Go to this link. It's licensefl.com. That's licensefl.com. Put that link in the description. It's got your step-by-step guide to get a Florida real estate license. And look, check it out. Give us a call. We're here to answer any questions it is that you have, and go out there and make some money.
Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com. Did you know that statewide only about 50% of test takers pass their state exam on the first try? At the Tampa School of Real Estate, we've broken down passing the class and state exams into 4 simple steps: learning the information, reinforcing the information, testing your knowledge, and being confident and prepared. View the details of the full strategy at passfirsttry.com. That's passfirsttry.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. We're live every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Christmer. The show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate, your source for all of your real estate education needs. And before we get back into today's topic of going over these key terms, these most important key terms that you're going to come across not only in your business, but are extremely important to know if you want to be able to pass your real estate exams. The better it is you're able to speak this language, And it doesn't have to be complex. If you're just tuning in, what we're covering so far, we went through 3 terms basically. We talked about stipulation, acknowledgement, and constructive notice. And if we want to come up with synonyms of these that we're more familiar with, we've got deal, notarization, and recording. So knowing these one-word kind of synonym definitions of this really makes this a lot easier to retain this information and be able to get a better understanding of what stipulation means on the exam. I don't recommend that you memorize the entire definition of these key terms. You really want to get it down to just basic words it is that you want to know. Yes, there's a much more lengthy definition for each one of these that makes more sense and might help you better understand this in the first place, but then you got to get back to memorizing just really the least that you can that helps you the most. It's kind of like, having your cake and eating it too, basically. That you want the least amount of information that helps you remember the most about it, that helps you the most on the exam. And that's what we're looking for. Sometimes it's difficult to just come up with these one single words here that make this simple, but that's what we're trying to do today. Before we get into any more key terms, I want to address some of these questions that we've got coming in. If there's any particular terms that you're kind of struggling with, that you're not 100% sure of, drop those in the comments because I want to cover those on here. I want to help you guys out that are tuning in. And again, if you're watching the replay of this later, still drop those in because we'll still get back to you and help you out with that stuff. But first couple questions. So we've got Nag Esrararo, sorry if I'm butchering that, over on YouTube asking how to get started in real estate. Write down this link. It's licensefl.com. So if you haven't taken the course yet, if you haven't done anything to obtain your license yet, or maybe you have taken the course but you haven't done your application or scheduled your exam even or anything like that, that's all available at licensefl.com. So that's licensefl.com. You go on there, it's got the step-by-step guide. So write that down after the episode. If you still need to iron out any details in the licensing process, you've got everything that you need at that link. So over on Facebook now, couple questions coming in. So Christopher Shishino, you got some terms here. We're going to go through these terms here. I like these terms it is that you brought up, so those are good. And we'll go through what's kind of important to know out of those. Question from Vince Curtin about continuing education. With continuing education, you could take that exam multiple times. I believe it's 6 is the limit. After you've taken it 6 times, then you've got to go through and do it again. But with those continuing education ones, they're usually pretty easy, so I don't think you'll need to download. Rarely do we have people that need to retake the continuing education. So that's that. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much all the questions. So Chris, let's go ahead and get down into these terms it is that you brought up. And you mentioned a really good one. That's, again, another one that a lot of people overcomplicate, but it's actually super easy. And that word is clause. So this term of clause, you're going to see it a lot. It'll talk about this clause or that clause, or a contingency or a financing clause or an acceleration clause or a due on sale clause. And a lot of times people won't make a whole lot of effort to understand just what that root word there is, of what a clause is. And it's super simple, so there's no reason why you shouldn't have a firm understanding of what a clause is. And a clause is just, again, one-word definitions. If we could come up with a one-word definition, it makes it super easy to remember. This is a paragraph. This is just a paragraph, a block of text in some sort of legal document. We have clauses in contracts, we have clauses in deeds, we have clauses in mortgage promissory notes. It's just a legal term for a paragraph, and that's it. There's really not even much else really that you need to know. There's a lot of different types of clauses that are covered in the course, especially with the mortgage sections. It talks about some of these different clauses. But you want to know what that root word is, because now all of a sudden it makes things a lot easier when we're trying to use that in the context of a question. And you'll see this in a lot of different ways because there's a lot of different clauses there in the course that are covered, but it's just a paragraph. Don't overcomplicate it anything more than that. It's a block of text. So a couple examples of this. We have the due on sale clause. The due on sale clause is one of the important clauses to remember. And you got to start again with the simple stuff. Before you break this even into more difficult things such as the due on sale clause, you want to make sure you know what clause is first, because we know that's a paragraph. So we could already rephrase this as, what is the due on sale clause? Well, it's a due on sale paragraph. Okay, now it's starting to make a little bit more sense because we know this is a paragraph in a document that says something about being due on sale. what could the paragraph be saying about due on sale? Now, if we pay attention to this, so we'll talk about this one again in particular, the due on sale clause. So due on sale, if we pay attention to these words, we know clause means paragraph, sale is when we sell the property, and due. So trying to break this down into as simple as possible, this one's a little bit more complicated. There's a few ways, a few things it is that you want to know about the due on sale clause. So number one, know that clause is just a paragraph. And if we want to kind of rephrase this, so it has to deal with mortgage, and if I were to try to make this just one word, it is that you want to remember. Now, this isn't a specific definition. The due on sale clause is not a mortgage, but it's associated with a mortgage. So that's the one word I would try to add to the due on sale clause about the mortgage. But more importantly, and we'll keep this in red here because it's also important to remember, again, we want to try to get this down to just one word, but sometimes that's not possible to really for some of these more complex and more specific things like the due on sale clause. So it has to do with mortgages, specifically in the promissory note. We'll just put the note. So it's a clause that's in our mortgage note, our promissory note. And what this clause says is that the mortgage is due on the sale of the property. Meaning that when we sell the property, our mortgage is due. And even though this is lengthier, this is more words, this ultimately isn't that difficult to remember because we can kind of use those same words here. So let's rephrase this just as mortgage due when property sold. Now, that's not one word. Mortgage due when property sold is not one word, which, yeah, it's breaking a rule of try to get a one-word definition, but some of these concepts, it's to know the information that you really need to know. All these other ones, knowing a clause is a paragraph, a stipulation is a deal, acknowledgement means notarization, constructive notice means recording. There's really not much else I would focus on with that. But with the due on sale clause, and that's what makes this difficult, but putting this little effort into your studying of trying to simplify what it is that you're studying will really help make it a lot more memorable when you're reviewing this information and trying to remember it on your exam. So this just means that the mortgage is due when the property is sold, meaning that you have to pay off the balance of your mortgage when the property is sold. And look, if you need to rephrase this a little bit to make more sense to you, that's what's important here. If notarization is not a term that you're too familiar with, that might be the case. Maybe you've never had anything notarized before, and in that case, you're maybe unfamiliar with what notarization is. So in that case, then maybe you do need a little bit lengthier definition here. But if you already know what notarization is, no need to further complicate this. No need to make it harder on yourself of remembering more information. The due on sale clause, a little bit different there. This is one of the terms that's super important for the exam. This one very likely to show up, the due on sale clause, at some point on your exam. And what you want to remember about this is mortgage is due when the property is sold. And one other thing I'd recommend that you remember, no assumption. So if there is a due on sale clause, if there's a due on sale clause in your mortgage promissory note, your mortgage cannot be assumed. And maybe we rephrase that. Again, you want to put these in words that you understand. That's where this becomes most effective. So maybe no assumption makes sense to you. But if it doesn't, maybe instead of no assumption, we rephrase this differently as cannot be assumed. Maybe that makes more sense to you. Maybe no assumption makes more sense to you. Again, what's important here is translating this into words that you understand. That's what learning a new language is all about. It's you understand what this word refers to. So this is an important point to remember about the due on sale clause, and let's dive a little bit deeper into this. And as far as for studying this stuff, if neither of these make sense to you about mortgage being due when the property is sold, cannot be assumed, and any of these points here, if you're like, well, deal with the Division of Real Estate Attorney, why is there a deal? If you don't understand the why behind some of these things, it makes it a little bit more difficult to remember, which is why the course can get so in depth with certain topics, when you don't need to know it that in depth for your exam, but when you know kind of the story behind it a little bit, or the reason why, or its application in the real world, it makes it a little bit easier to remember at times. So when we're talking about the due on sale clause, so this is a paragraph in our mortgage contract. That's what our promissory note is. That's another word we could put up here, the note. What is the note? Two words we'll use for this one. Again, we want to try to get one word, but sometimes it might be better just for two words. And it's still pretty easy to remember two words versus one word. So the note is your mortgage contract. That's basically what the note is. This is your agreement. That's what a contract is. We want to break down that word contract. Again, notice how knowing this language is going to help you out here. A contract, the word I like to use for this is a promise. That's it. Maybe you like the word better of agreement. Again, whatever makes more sense to you, that's what you want to try to remember. If you don't really understand promises too much, almost everyone understands what a promise is. It's an agreement between people. So if that word makes sense to you, then remember promise. If agreement makes more sense to you, then remember agreement. But pick one of them that makes sense to you, because you don't need to remember both of them for these here. And when we know that a contract is a promise, now what is a mortgage contract? Well, that's called a note, and the mortgage contract is a mortgage promise or a mortgage agreement. This is an agreement between the borrower and the lender. That's called the note. The note is their agreement. It stipulates all the details of the mortgage. And now notice how I kind of use that word here of stipulate. Now, there's a different definition of the way I've just used that there. This isn't the Florida Real Estate Commission definition. That's maybe more so with how you're familiar with this in the real world. If you were to say stipulate, it typically means specify in the real world. We could make that connection of how the deal is the specification of what the penalty may be, but what's a lot easier to remember for the exam is that stipulation is the deal. So going back to the note is our mortgage contract. And in this mortgage contract, we might have a paragraph that says the mortgage is due on the sale. Meaning when we go to sell our property, our mortgage is due. The mortgage has to be paid when we sell the property. And that prevents assumption. Cannot be assumed. So there's another key word. Assumption. The mortgage section, there's a lot of key terms here. There's a lot of language in the mortgage section. Knowing the language of the mortgage section will really, and you can see how these words tie together, how they all kind of weave in and out of each other here. So the word assumption, or to assume a mortgage, so assumption, or we'll also put right under it here, assume. So assumption or assuming a mortgage, what that basically means, if we want to keep it simple, and yes, there is more to know about assuming a mortgage, but if we want to break this down to as simple as we can, assumption or assuming is take over mortgage. There's actually more to it, and more probably that you should remember with the assumption, but you've got to start with those basics. And for these more complex topics where there's lots of different things to know about them, start with the most basic sense of this. Okay, what assumption is. Assumption is to take over somebody's mortgage. And really, we could word this better. And the better it is that we understand this, the better we're able to phrase these out. It's not necessarily taking over a mortgage. We could word this as buyer added to, if we want to really be specific here with not adding too much, to the seller's mortgage. That's a much better definition. And notice how we got the better definition and this became a little bit longer. The longer something is, the more detailed your definition is, the more accurate that definition will be. But again, sometimes we've got to start with these basics and start with just, okay, getting that down, added to the mortgage. If we wanted to start out with that, and we'll just added to mortgage. Maybe we're underlining that. Added to mortgage. We get that down first. Okay, assumption meaning they're added to the mortgage. Well, who's added to the mortgage? The buyer's added to the mortgage. Added to whose mortgage? The seller's mortgage. Notice how we start using these building blocks and piling this information on top of each other to get a better understanding of the full scope of these different key terms here. Now, tying back into the due on sale clause, which is found in our mortgage note, which is a mortgage contract, a mortgage agreement, an agreement between you as the borrower and the lender as to the terms of repaying and then what happens if you don't repay, the foreclosure of a property. So running through all of this here, if we've got a due on sale clause, what does a due on sale clause mean? A due on sale clause means that the mortgage must be paid when the property is sold. And that means that the mortgage cannot be assumed. So we go to sell our property as a seller. If we have an outstanding mortgage loan, let's say our outstanding loan balance is $100,000 on the property. If we sell the property for $150,000, that first $100,000 goes towards paying off our mortgage balance. Then we have whatever other fees, commissions, and things like that we pay, and then the money left over is our net. So that's another word here, net meaning after expenses. And now notice how these words, and a lot of times you don't even notice all of these words and how there's all these words, and the better it is you understand the definitions and what these words actually mean, the better you're able to speak this language. And that's why if you maybe first read through some information about this, your head will feel like it's spinning and you don't even know what it is that you're looking at, and that a lot of times comes from not knowing the meaning of these words, because you've got to be able to speak the language to understand what's trying to be communicated with you on the exam or in the real world as well, because these terms of due on sale clause, assumption, mortgage note, contract, constructive notice, clause, these are words that will, some of them more than others, definitely show up in your day-to-day business. So again, assumption, that's the buyer added to the seller's mortgage. You're essentially taking over, but it doesn't remove the seller, which is why we've got that we rephrase that to make it a little bit more accurate here. And when you're studying with this type of stuff and whatnot, you want to make sure that this information is accurate, that you're not studying the wrong information, which that's where you want to be careful when you're paraphrasing and trying to simplify this stuff down. When you're trying to break this down into simpler terms here and get these basics of it, then that's where you have a chance of maybe misinterpreting something, maybe changing that meaning a little bit too far, which if you're worried about that, ask your instructor. That's what we're here to do. Ask the instructor. The instructor that's in your actual class though, ask them, hey, I'm trying to simplify this down. Is this basically a deal? They might give you some more information there, but ultimately that might be a good word to kind of sum up a stipulation, or whatever it is that you might come up with here. And even if you're taking our online course, you've got instructor support as well, so just shoot us a message. There's a chat system right in there. You could email us your question. Email is probably the best for keeping track of that back and forth and whatnot, and getting good detailed information. You could also call us as well if you're enrolled in our online course if you need a little bit of help with some of this stuff here. So you're not on your own when you're a student of us, but I'll get out of sales pitch mode with that there. But for those of you guys that are students of ours, definitely utilize that resource you have of your instructor, whether it's your instructor right there in front of you in the class or your virtual instructor that you have with our online course. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. I know we've got some more terms that are coming in here, it looks like, in the chat, so stick with us. We're going to get to those, but after this quick commercial break, we're going to talk about more key terms that you want to know for your exam. I'm John Crismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Hey, so if you're thinking about starting a real estate career, it could feel a little overwhelming sometimes. Look, that's completely understandable. That's why we're here to help. If you haven't already, check out our Success Center, tampaschool.com/success, or if you don't even know where to begin, give us a call. We'd love to help you out. We've got advisors standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way it is that we can. Our phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. Give us a call. We're the Tampa School of Real Estate.
Do you want a career that allows you to be in control? With a career in real estate, you'll get to call the shots. Whether you're looking at starting part-time or want to become the next top agent, a career in real estate makes it possible. Find out what it takes at tampaschool.com. Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com. Are you thinking about a career in real estate? Hey, I'm John Chrisma with the Tampa School of Real Estate, and we've helped thousands of people just like you obtain their real estate license. If you're thinking about a career in real estate, give us a call. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Our advisors are standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way they can. Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor, the key terms episode of Ask the Instructor, where what we're doing on this Wednesday, every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, Fridays, we do State of Real Estate, different show about growing your business, but you absolutely should tune into that one because it'll talk about making money once you have your real estate license. But today, the focus of Ask the Instructor is understanding real estate, the technical side of real estate. And real estate is a very technical process. I had a student ask me the other day, hey John, what makes realtors important? What makes real estate professionals basically have a purpose? Why are we not getting replaced by computers yet? And will we get replaced by computers someday? Is Zillow going to have some real estate robot out there? And a lot of realtors are afraid of something like that. But I would venture to say that the professionals that are afraid of, Zillow or one of these places coming in and replacing us here. First of all, Zillow makes probably 99% of their money off of agents paying for advertising on the site. So if they get rid of us, then they really don't have money. We're kind of the ones funding everything that Zillow does through their advertising. So they kind of need that constant flow of money from us. So that's probably one reason why they don't want to get rid of us. But the reason why it's not really technologically possible at this point in time. Maybe someday in the future there'll be a supercomputer smart enough to understand the little nuances that exist in real estate, maybe someday, but right now we're nowhere near that level of technology just because there's so much interpretation involved with real estate, and a lot of it's a matter of opinion rather than a matter of fact, and that's where your expertise is important, and even a little bit of intuition. That's probably one of the key factors that differentiates us from the computers. Now, something the computers are really good at is basic information, understanding what a stipulation is, an acknowledgement, and so on and so forth. So we definitely want to know these more technical things, but then when it comes down to interpreting this in this particular circumstance and blending together all these factors and what's important for our clients and what's important in terms of the current state of the real estate market where this particular property is located, that's where we come in. And our knowledge, our expertise here, our professionalism is what sets us apart from not only computers that can't do what we could do, but also other agents who might be capable of doing what it is that we could do. So the more knowledge it is that you have, and this is again essential for passing your real estate exams. You need to have this information down to be able to pass your real estate exams. But again, these are key terms that you're going to see in your day-to-day business. Any transaction, any sale that you do that involves mortgages is going to have a note. Assumption you're probably not going to see. You will see due on sale clauses in these mortgage notes, or every contract we deal with. It's just a bunch of documents, a bunch of sheets of paper that have clauses or paragraphs in them. And then understanding the basic premise of what a contract really is. Most of our clients don't really understand what a contract is. A contract is not a estimate. It's not a intention. It's a promise. It's an agreement.
So what's important for us to convey, taking kind of a step back from the exam topics, and we did see some questions coming over on the break here. We're looking through these here. I know Lita is asking about the estate for years and tenancy at Sufferance and so on and so forth, which we will absolutely talk about those, because those are ones that are also come up quite a bit. But so going back to the real world implication of a contract and understanding really what a contract truly is, that it's not an estimate, it's not an intention, it's a promise, it's an agreement. And that's why I like to use the word promise, because we're not supposed to break promises. I don't care who you are, you're not supposed to break promises. It's bad, and there's bad things that can happen if you break a promise, or what we use for legal terms of breach a contract. Just throwing some more of these up here, let's make some room here to talk about some of this other stuff here. So when we're dealing with contracts, so contracts, it's a promise or an agreement. Yeah, we want to know that. Yeah, our clients might say, oh yeah, no, it's an agreement. But I like to use promise because people break agreements. If I say agreement versus I say promise, if I ask somebody, do you promise to sell your house? We're really just asking them to sign a contract to sell their house, versus an agreement. Oh, I might agree now, but tomorrow I might not agree anymore. And that's the way people look at typically, from at least what I've noticed in the real world. Promises and agreements typically have different meanings to people. So I like the word promise better, but agreement isn't incorrect if you use the true definition of an agreement, which basically is a promise. But let's talk about breach. So breach is an important topic to know that corresponds with a contract, and what breach means is to break. To break a contract. So if we breach a contract, we break our promise. Notice how these simple one-word definitions, all of a sudden this makes things a little bit clearer. A legal document, an exam question might say breach of contract, breaking of a promise. Breaking our promise. That's what breach of contract is. And you'll notice how these are very similar here, which again, sometimes context loses. And that's why you don't have to dig too much deeper into what breach is. Breach is break. And if you want to throw one more word in here, I would put it as bad. That breaching a contract is bad. And I wouldn't even put that in red. Let's put that in the black here, because that's significantly less important. You do want to know that's bad. And the reason why it's bad is we have all of these what's called remedies for breach. So we have all of these remedies for breach of contract. And what's typically our remedy is what's called liquidated damages. So this is another term. So this is a remedy for breach. And what is a remedy? Again, kind of paraphrasing this stuff here. A remedy is a fix for breaking the contract. If we break the contract, well, it's broken, so we have to fix it. We have to make it right for the other party here. And what's commonly used in the real world to remedy or fix breach of contract is liquidated damages. And what liquidated damages is your deposit. So if the buyer is forfeiting their deposit to the seller because the buyer decides that they just don't want to buy the house anymore, and in the contract, there's lots of clauses that we might put in there that says they have to get approved for financing. And if they don't get approved for financing, it's not breach of contract. Or maybe there's a clause in there that says the property is subject to approval of the buyer's inspection. And if the buyer doesn't approve of the inspection, that's not breaking the contract because we're within the confines and the details of the contract. But if we don't have any of that in there, if we don't specify in the contract that we're using financing and that we need to be approved for financing, and if we're not approved, then no deal, then that potentially and probably will be breach if we don't include that in the contract, if we're not specific in putting that in the contract. Or it might be, let's say that we specify 15 days for an inspection period in our contract, and we wait until 20 days. Well, we had that window of 15 days to cancel, to terminate the contract and not breach the contract. But if we dragged our feet and we waited until 20 days to do the inspection and we find out that all these problems exist on the property and we don't want to buy it anymore, it's too late. So we got to go back to what's in our contract. So the contract might specify we've got 15 days to inspect the property. If we don't inspect it till 20 days, we blew it, essentially. And now what we do as a good realtor, stepping aside from the exam implications of this, because this is much more in depth than what you want to know for the exam. But again, knowing the real world can sometimes help a little bit for understanding the theoretical side of this. Just be careful, because a little bit too much real world is going to overcomplicate these topics. But in the real world, as a good real estate professional, if we've got 15 days to do the inspection and we know that our buyer hasn't done their inspection yet and we haven't been pushing them to get the inspection done, and either way, whatever the case may be, that they haven't done the inspection, we want to make sure that we communicate with our buyer, hey, your inspection period runs out today. If we don't get the property inspected and review that inspection report, you're going to be stuck buying the property because you promised to buy the property. And if you breach the agreement, if you break the agreement, if you wait until 16 days, even though the contract only said 15 days, and you say 16 days in that you want to not buy the property, you're going to be in breach. You're breaking your promise. And that break of promise, one of the remedies, one of the ways the seller could seek to fix this is liquidated damages. So that deposit you made for the property, the seller will try to get that deposit. And the buyer might say, well, I won't let him have it. It's not quite up to you. It's up to you two coming to an agreement, or there's maybe some more severe damages that could happen. But that's where we'd have our remedy that would come in if we breach the contract. Now, if after 14 days we do our inspection and notify that we want to terminate the contract because we don't like the inspection, we're within the confines of the contract. We're within the clauses, the paragraphs that we specified in the contract, so that would not be considered breach. And I'm no means here, just to make sure that we're not misinterpreting this, giving you legal advice or anything like that. We're as a real estate professional, we're not offering legal advice. It's important for us that we advise our clients, that we tell our clients that, hey, these are the things that could happen. So let's say we're on the seller side of this here and the buyer's trying to breach the contract. We're not the seller's attorney. So if the seller does want to seek liquidated damages or specific performance or anything like that, then that's up to them. Or if they want more advice, that's where they would potentially bring in an attorney for this, especially if we're talking about some of these others like specific performance, where they definitely want to bring in an attorney for. Liquidated damages, discuss with your broker. So discuss with your broker first and foremost. If further legal counsel is needed, then hire legal counsel. Maybe call up the Florida attorney hotline for the Florida realtors. The Florida realtors, you have the attorney hotline that you call up and ask legal questions to. Again, they're not representing you, but they're there to answer basic legal questions that kind of help make sense out of the stuff. So definitely utilize those benefits you get from joining the Association of Realtors. But that's what liquidated damages is. If the seller's basically seeking the deposit, because remember, with deposits, we have to have agreement or we have to have one of the settlement procedures. So deposits get very complicated not just in terms of the exam, but also in the real world for handling deposits. So liquidated damages, the seller keeping a deposit. Another one we have is called specific performance. And if we pay attention to this wording of specific performance, so performance means to carry out the contract. Specific performance means that we're suing to carry out the contract as it specifies. So if we want to break this down and for one word, I don't think one word is going to do it for this one, but we could probably get it in 3 words. Sue for performing, or maybe sue to perform contract. Yeah, we'll call that. Sue to perform contract. And again, you want to put these in words it is that you understand here. So if that doesn't make sense to you, sue to perform contract, maybe we have to add a little bit more to it so you understand it. File a lawsuit to perform the contract, because that's something that can be done. So if the buyer says, no, I'm going to breach the contract, I'm going to break the contract, the seller says, okay, the seller says that, okay, if you want to breach the contract, if you want to break the contract, I'm going to take you to court and sue you for specific performance. I'm going to sue you to perform the contract as it's specifically stated. You promised to buy my house, I'm going to take you to court and sue for you to buy my house because you already promised to do that. That's the implications of a contract. And there's a few other remedies for breach as well. Because we're almost out of time, these are probably the two most important ones I would say to know there, but there's 4 remedies for breach total. Before we go ahead and finish up for the day, I do want to talk about Alita's question here. Alita, I believe how that's said there. So about the estate for years, tenancy at sufferance, and tenancy at will. So these terms have to deal with when you're leasing property. So these 3 terms, and again, we want to try to make these simple here. You might want to seek further details to better understand this, but for remembering, you want to remember basic, simple, key points. You don't want to try to remember every last detail because it becomes very difficult to try to remember every last detail. So with leases, or how you're going to see this on the exam, is leasehold estates. That's what a leasehold estate is. A leasehold estate is just where you're leasing property. So keyword there of leasehold estate. So keyword lease though. So of these leasehold estates, let's first talk about what's most commonly used when you're leasing property, and that's called an estate for years. So an estate for years, to break it down as simple as you want to remember it, it has an end date. Which, when you sign a lease, maybe you do a 1-year lease for somewhere. You do a 1-year lease, you have a start. Any lease is always going to have a starting date because it always starts at some point. But what makes an estate for years unique from the other types of leases is that there is an end date. There's a certain date that this estate for years is over. And yes, you could always renew it, but your lease ends. Your leasehold estate, or AKA your lease, ends at this date. 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 6 months from now, whatever the case may be. That's an estate for years. Now, the second type we have, and these are really our 2 main types here, and the third one, the tenancy at sufferance, doesn't always occur, but it can. The second type, and the words estate and tenancy are pretty much interchangeable. But how this is worded on the exam, because this is how the FREC specifies it as a key term, is a tenancy at will. So now, what is a tenancy at will, and how is it different than estate for years? And another word we could possibly use up here for estate for years is definite. And the word we could use for tenancy at will is indefinite. Now, what does definite versus indefinite mean? Definite means that it's specific, that it has an ending date, whereas indefinite, it goes on forever, basically. So, probably the easiest way, it's probably quite a few words, much longer than end date, but we could say week to week, etc. We'll just say etc. Because this could also be month to month, year to year, something like that. That's a tenancy at will. That this lease automatically renews every week or every month. That's what your tenancy at will is. And the difference than an estate for years is this is indefinite. This week-to-week arrangement goes on until you either give notice to your landlord that you're no longer going to rent. And if it's week to week, that's a 7-day notice you have to give. If it's month to month, it's a 15-day notice that you have to give. Or the landlord tells you, hey, I'm not going to rent to you anymore. You've got 7 days to get out of the apartment if it's week to week, or 15 days if it's month to month to get out. That's what a tenancy at will is. We don't have an agreement like we do with an estate for years. An estate for years, we're still paying monthly, like we could be, because this could also, again, be month to month. So we're still paying monthly with an estate for years, but the difference is that lease ends at this end date. Now again, we could make a new estate for years. We could renew the lease, renew making a new lease. We're doing it again, mean again, remaking a new lease. That's what renewing a lease is. But after that end date, our lease is over. We either got to renew it or we're getting out. With the tenancy at will, it could be week to week or month to month. And if you want to throw the dates in with these here too for how long the cancellation is, it's 7 days for week to week and 15 days if it's month to month. And then finally, we have our third type. And these are two common types of leases. More so, estate for years is the most common that you find, but you can do tenancy at will at a lot of places as well. But our third type of lease, this one only occurs in certain circumstances, and this is called the tenancy at sufferance. So the tenancy at sufferance is when you stay beyond end date. And if we want to add a little bit more to that, without permission. And as you think of this and try to maybe simplify this down more, you might be able to kind of make that more concise in a way that still makes sense to you, that you can still understand. But that's what a tenancy at sufferance is. So let's say our week to week, our landlord gave us 7 days notice that, hey, you're in a week to week lease. You're in a tenancy at will, a week to week agreement. I'm giving you your 7 days notice. Now what happens? What does it become if we're still there after 7 days? It becomes a tenancy at sufferance. So that's what the tenancy at sufferance is. We're staying beyond the end date without permission of the landlord. The landlord said we've got to be out, but we're not out. So when your checkout in your hotel room is 11 a.m. and you're still there after 11 a.m., that's a tenancy at sufferance. Or in the case of when we're renting a apartment or maybe renting office space or something like that, when we go beyond the end date, and this could go for the estate for years as well. If we have a specific ending date for our lease, but we're still there, that makes it a tenancy at sufferance. You could think the landlord has to suffer with you staying in the property even though the lease is over. So that's what this tenancy at sufferance is. It means that you're staying beyond the end date. And we could put here, again, to add a little bit more detail maybe with this, landlord suffers because you're still there. Again, only put stuff on these little flashcards or however it is that you're reviewing the stuff that makes sense to you. That's what's important with this. Putting these legal terms in words that make sense to you. So that's about all the time it is that we have today. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg for key terms. We're definitely going to do another one of these Ask the Instructors. This is the first time we've done one of these ones like this here, talking about the key terms, but there's a lot of key terms covered in the course, and these are definitely important to know. Not so much know how these apply in everyday real estate, but know specifically, first and foremost, if you're studying for your exam, how this applies for your exam, how this applies in the questions they might ask you on the exam in the context of the course, not necessarily how these apply in the real world. Again, you'll see this. If you deal with leases, if you're doing property management, or you're a rental agent helping getting tenants in units, you're going to come across these leases, typically in a state for years is what it's going to be, but it's important to know these things. Not only for your exam, but as you practice real estate as well, because this makes you more of a professional when you can speak the language. You don't have to Google what all these different terms mean. The more it is that you use them, the more sense it'll actually make to you. And the better it is, you'll understand this. Learning is a constant evolving process that you take in new information every day that might help you make a little bit more sense out of what it is that you might already know, and maybe you're learning some new things as well. That's what we're here to do on Ask the Instructor. Maybe reinforce what you already know, and maybe help you learn something new as well, so you kind of get a better understanding of this technical side of the real estate industry. That's what we do every Wednesday at 12 in the Eastern Time on Ask the Instructor. We're here, we're live every Wednesday. If you're not subscribed to us yet, hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Follow our page if you're watching on Facebook. Best place, though, is at our Success Center, tampaschool.com/success. This is your resource, your hub for so much great content that will help you prepare for your exam, that will help you prepare for your career, that will teach you ways that you can make money. And the best part of everything on our Success Center is available for free, even if you're not one of our students yet. That might get closed up soon. I've been pushing for you guys to keep that information out there open and to the public for you guys to share with everyone. But there's so much great content on there. People think we're crazy for not charging people for everything it is we provide on our Success Center. And the reason why we do that is we want to see you successful in the real estate industry. So go on to tampaschool.com/success. You can watch the replay of this episode as well as lots of episodes of Ask the Instructor, as well as our other show, State of Real Estate, as well as articles and calculators and so many helpful tools to help you get your real estate license and then go make some money with your real estate license. So ultimately, you're successful. First, you got to be successful at passing the exam, then you've got to be successful at making money. You do those two things, you're a success. And that's our goal. We want to see you successful. We want to see our students and really everyone in the real estate industry succeed, because the succeeding real estate industry is good for everyone, including us, because we want you telling all your friends and family who are maybe considering a career in real estate who they need to talk to. And you know who that is. It's the Tampa School of Real Estate. Have them tune in. Feel free to share this video with maybe one of your friends or maybe classmates that's maybe studying for their exams. This would be especially helpful for them, especially today's episode that we did here. But feel free to share any of these videos with them. Share this knowledge. The real estate industry is a very cooperative industry. We're all here to help each other out. And that's the type of environment we want to foster here at the Tampa School of Real Estate. If you were just watching this video and you don't have a real estate license yet, and you haven't really even started the process, or maybe you're gotten partway through the process but you haven't finished it, go to licencefl.com. That's licencefl.com. It's got the step-by-step guide, everything you need to know about getting your real estate license in Florida. The steps, it's got links to the application, phone numbers for the DBPR, for the Pearson VUE Testing Center, links to get your fingerprints scheduled, information on the courses it is that you need to take. It's got a whole step-by-step video on there, really helpful information that's available at licencefl.com. And you could also give us a call. We've got advisors standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way it is that they can. That phone number, call or text it. It's 813-333-2676. Again, that's 813-333-2676. That's about all the time we have for today. I'm John Kirsten with the show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate, and you've been watching Ask the Instructor. If you've been thinking about real estate, look, in this current market, it's hard not to. There's so many opportunities that exist out there for residential real estate, commercial real estate, business brokerage, property management. I mean, it's ridiculous how much opportunity lies from having a real estate license. So look, if you've been thinking about getting a real estate license, I mean, it's minimal cost compared to starting other careers and starting other businesses to get into this. So I urge you to check it out and give it a try. I mean, even if you're just using your license for personal use, you've got huge, immense benefits there. Go to this link. It's licencefl.com. That's licencefl.com. Put that link in the description. It's got your step-by-step guide to get a Florida real estate license. And look, check it out. Give us a call. We're here to answer any questions it is that you have, and go out there and make some money.
Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com. Did you know that statewide only about 50% of test takers pass their state exam on the first try? At the Tampa School of Real Estate, we've broken down passing class and state exams into 4 simple steps: learning the information, reinforcing the information, testing your knowledge, and being confident and prepared. View the details of the full strategy at passfirsttry.com. That's passfirsttry.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.